Francis Bacon was an English philosopher, statesman, scientist, and prolific author who played a pivotal role in the development of modern scientific methodology and philosophical empiricism. His advocacy for empirical methods of scientific inquiry laid the foundations for what would later become the scientific method. He served as both Attorney General and Lord Chancellor of England, but despite this great political career, he is most celebrated for his intellectual contributions. His work proposed an inductive approach to science, collecting data, analyzing it, and then formalizing a hypothesis, which was a significant departure from the largely deductive reasoning of the time. Thus, his ideas would have a lasting impact on the development of science, making him a key figure in the transition from the Renaissance to the early modern period. His call for a new science based on empirical and inductive principles helped pave the way for future generations of scientists and thinkers, influencing a wide array of fields beyond just science, including law and literature. Hello and welcome to the channel. If it's your first time here, good to meet you. And if you're coming back, it's great to see you again. As always, the best way to support the channel is just by enjoying the content. Those who want to go above and beyond may refer to the description of this video. You'll find where you need to go. And now, without further ado, please allow yourself to become relaxed, and we can begin our biography of Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon, the future luminary of scientific method and philosophy, was born on the 22nd of January, 1561, at York House near the Strand in the city of London. He was the son of Sir Nicholas Bacon, the esteemed Lord Keeper of the Great Seal, and his second wife, Anne Cook Bacon. Yes, I know, not a joke, her name is Cook Bacon. Herself the daughter of the renowned Renaissance humanist Anthony Cook. This connection made Francis part of an influential network, and his aunt was married to William Cecil, the first Baron of Burghley, one of the most powerful men in England, and uncle to Francis. From an early age, things were not easy. Francis's health was fragile at the best of times, which led to his education being primarily an affair conducted at home. But he was not short of tutors, with those including John Walstall, an Oxford-educated man with very strong Puritan beliefs. Well, despite all of his health challenges, Bacon embarked on a more formal education at the age of 12, when he entered Trinity College at the University of Cambridge on April 5, 1573. He spent 3 years there alongside his older brother Anthony, studying all sorts of topics. The boys were under the watchful eye of Dr. John Whitgift, the future Archbishop of Canterbury. Their studies were pretty normal for the day, steeped in Latin and followed by the traditional medieval curriculum that one would expect from an institution such as Oxford. It was during the time at Cambridge that Bacon had his first encounter with Queen Elizabeth I, who was apparently impressed by his precocious intellect, and famously referred to him as the young Lord Keeper. Remember that his father was the esteemed Lord Keeper of the Great Seal. It's quite a compliment. while Bacon's academic pursuits led him to question the established scientific methods and results of his time, finding them flawed and unproductive. Now, this isn't to say that we throw out the baby with the bathwater. In fact, like everybody at the time, he rather admired Aristotle and the old world thinkers. How could you not? But he found that Aristotelian philosophy to be barren and misguided in its objectives, his words, not mine. His studies at Gray's Inn, which he joined with his brother in June of 1576, were interrupted when he travelled abroad with Sir Amias Powlett, the English ambassador to Paris. While Francis was absorbing political lessons in France under the reign of Henry III and travelling through Blois, Poitiers, Tours, Italy, and Spain, Anthony continued his studies back home in England. Francis's European tours enhanced his understanding of language, statecraft, and civil law, and he occasionally undertook diplomatic tests, such as delivering letters to significant figures, such as Walsingham, Burleigh, Leicester, and at one point, even the Queen. In February of 1579, the death of his father, Sir Nicholas, brought an abrupt end to this period of his life. Sir Nicholas had intended to purchase an estate for Francis, but his untimely death meant that Francis inherited only a fraction of the planned sum. This financial blow forced Bacon into debt, leading him to reside at Gray's Inn to study law and support himself. His financial situation was somewhat alleviated by a grant from his mother, who gave him the manor of Marks near Romford in Essex, which provided him with an annual rent of £46. It doesn't sound like much, but at the time, not bad. This period marked the beginning of Francis's long and distinguished, though at times troubled, career in law, philosophy, and science. He dedicated his life to three main objectives, that being serving the church, serving his country, and uncovering truth. To fulfill these aspirations, he sought a more prominent position. In 1580, he applied for a court post through the influence of his uncle, Lord Burleigh, hoping it would allow him to pursue a scholarly life. Unfortunately, his application was unsuccessful. So, for the next 2 years, Francis quietly worked away at Gray's Inn, until he was admitted as an outer barrister in 1582. His political career had already commenced in 1581, when he was elected as a Member of Parliament for Boseney, Cornwall, in a by-election. He later represented Melcombe in Dorset in 1584 and Taunton in 1586. During this period, he began writing about the state of the Church and philosophical reform, producing the now lost tract Temporis Partis Maximus. Despite his efforts, he did not secure the positions he believed would lead to success. Showing leanings towards Puritanism, Bacon attended Puritan sermons at Gray's Inn, and accompanied his mother to the Temple Church to hear Walter Travers. This involvement led to his earliest surviving tract, which criticized the suppression of Puritan clergy by the English Church. In the 1586 Parliament, he vocally supported the execution of the Catholic Mary, Queen of Scots. Around this time, Bacon's uncle sought assistance once more, resulting in significant progress in his legal career. He became a bencher in 1586 and was elected as a reader in 1587, delivering his first lectures during Lent of 1588. The following year, he secured the reversion to clerkship of the Star Chamber, a position worth £1,600 annually, although he did not formally assume this role until 1608. In 1588, Bacon served as the MP for Liverpool, and later represented Middlesex in 1593. He subsequently represented Ipswich 3 times, and Cambridge University once in 1614. He had already earned a reputation as a progressive reformer, advocating for legal amendments and simplifications, less bureaucracy, basically. And although loyal to the crown, he opposed feudal privileges for autocratic powers, speaking out against religious persecution and criticizing the House of Lords for overstepping on money bills. He championed the union of England and Scotland, viewing it as essential for the peace and strength of both nations. You'll have to ask the Scottish about that. Later, he would also support the integration of Ireland into this union, believing that closer constitutional ties would bring stability and unity. He also formed a close relationship with Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, who was Queen Elizabeth's favourite. By 1591, Bacon had become Essex's confidential advisor. In 1592, he was tasked with responding to a Jesuit polemic by Robert Parson, resulting in the tract Certain Observations Made upon a Libel, which defended England by likening it to democratic Athens against an aggressive Spain. In February of 1593, he took his third parliamentary seat for Middlesex, when Elizabeth convened Parliament to address a Roman Catholic conspiracy against her. Francis's opposition to a bill proposing triple subsidies in half the usual time managed to offend the Queen, and led to accusations of him courting popularity. Well, this caused his temporary exclusion from royal favour. When the Attorney General's position became available in 1594, Essex's support was insufficient to secure the post for Francis, which went instead to Sir Edward Coke. Bacon also failed to obtain the Solicitor General position in 1595, with Sir Thomas Fleming receiving the appointment. To mitigate these disappointments, Essex gifted Bacon a property in Twickenham, which Bacon sold for £1,800. In 1597, he achieved the distinction of becoming the first Queen's Counsel designate, and was granted a patent that gave him precedence at the bar. Despite these honours, he struggled to gain the recognition he sought, and his attempt to court the wealthy widow Lady Elizabeth Hatton ended in failure when she chose Edward Coke over him. This, of course, further strained their rivalry. In 1598, Bacon was arrested for debt, but his standing with the Queen gradually improved thereafter. Severing ties with Essex proved to be advantageous, as Essex was executed for treason in 1601. Bacon was appointed to investigate the charges against Essex, Testimonies from Essex's followers revealed plans for rebellion against the Queen. Bacon then joined the legal team led by Attorney General Sir Edward Coke at Essex's treason trial. While following his execution, the Queen commissioned Bacon to write the official account of what had happened. This document, which was heavily edited by the Queen and her ministers, was published as a declaration of the practices and treasons attempted and committed by Robert, late Earl of Essex, and his accomplices against Her Majesty and her kingdoms. I would have went for a little bit of a shorter name, but hey, that's just me. William Raleigh, Bacon's personal secretary and chaplain, described him as a compassionate judge, severe in dealing with crimes, but merciful towards individuals. Raleigh noted that Bacon harbored no malice, was not vindictive, and always refrained from defaming others. The accession of James I marked the turning point for Francis, who had gained increased favor with the new monarch. Thus, in 1603, Bacon was knighted, becoming Sir Francis Bacon. Demonstrating his political acumen, he penned the work Apologies to defend his actions in the Essex case, aligning himself with Essex's previous support for James's succession to the throne. During the uneventful first parliamentary session of James's reign, Bacon was married to Alice Barnum in the year 1604. His career continued to advance steadily. In June of 1607, he was appointed Solicitor General, and in 1608 he began his tenure as Clerk of the Star Chamber. Despite a substantial income from these positions, Bacon continued to struggle with lingering debts. He sought further advancement and political stability by backing King James and his authoritarian policies. During the fourth session of James's first Parliament in 1610, Bacon advised the king, though James's conflicts with the Commons over royal prerogatives and excessive spending ultimately led to the dissolution of Parliament in February of 1611. Nevertheless, Bacon managed to maintain favour with both the king and the Commons. In 1613, he was finally appointed Attorney General after advising the king on a judicial reshuffle. His tenure was, however, marked by controversial actions, such as his zealous and legally contentious efforts to convict Edmund Peacham for treason, which included the use of torture. Bacon also collaborated with Gray's Inn to produce The Masque of Flowers for the wedding of Robert Carr, the first Earl of Somerset, and Frances Howard, the Countess of Somerset. In 1616, however, he prosecuted the couple for murder. While his influence was challenged during the so-called Prince's Parliament of April 1614, which objected to his presence as the MP for Cambridge and opposed several royal initiatives he supported. Although he was allowed to remain in Parliament, a law was passed prohibiting the Attorney General from sitting in Parliament. Despite the growing resentment among his peers, Francis continued to enjoy the king's favour, which of course is probably the most important person to have on your side. In March of 1617, he was appointed temporary regent of England for a month, and in 1618 he finally became Lord Chancellor. On July the 12th, 1618, Bacon was elevated to the peerage as Baron Verulam of Verulam, earning the title Francis, Lord Verulam. His influence and mediation between the throne and the Parliament led to further elevation. On January 27, 1621, he was raised in peerage to the Viscount of St. Alban. His public career actually ended in disgrace in 1621. Financial difficulties led to a parliamentary committee charging him with 23 counts of corruption, accusations that were driven by his lifelong adversary, Sir Edward Coke. When confronted, Bacon acknowledged his guilt, stating, "My lords, it is my act, my hand, and my heart. I beseech your lordships to be merciful to a broken reed." He was fined £40,000 and imprisoned in the Tower of London at the King's pleasure, although his imprisonment was brief, and the fine was later remitted by the King. Remember what I said about having the right people on your side? Well, more gravely, one could argue, is that Bacon was barred from holding office or sitting in Parliament, narrowly escaping the degradation that would have stripped him of his noble titles. Following this downfall, he decided to dedicate himself to a more quiet life of studying and writing. It is widely accepted that Bacon had received gifts from litigants, a common practice of the time that didn't necessarily indicate deep-seated corruption, but somewhat hinted at it. While he did admit to lax conduct, he maintained that he never allowed these gifts to influence his judgments, and he sometimes ruled against those who had given him gifts. He defended himself to King James, asserting his innocence and offering to sacrifice himself for the king's sake. In a letter to George Villiers, the first Duke of Buckingham, Bacon expressed his peace of mind, emphasizing his integrity despite the accusations, and I'll read from the letter now. "My mind is calm, for my fortune is not my felicity. I know I have clean hands and a clean heart, and I hope a clean house for friends or servants. But Job himself, or whoever was the justest judge, by such hunting for matters against him as hath been used against me, may for a time seem foul, especially in a time when greatness is the mark and accusations is the game." Given the pervasive nature of gift-giving and the Commons' fervent investigation into judicial corruption, it has been suggested that Bacon was actually a scapegoat, deflecting attention from Buckingham's own questionable practices. The true reason behind Francis's confession is still a matter of debate. Some have speculated that illness, hope for leniency due to his fame and high office, or even blackmail with threats of a sodomy charge may have influenced his decision. Basil Montague, a British duelist, defended Bacon against accusations of servility and dissimulation. He argued that such criticisms were unfounded, pointed out that many notable figures of the age, like Herbert, Tennyson, and Selden, held Bacon in very high regard. He contended that Bacon's noble letters, his contempt for Lord Keeper Puckering, his straightforward dealings with Robert Cecil, and his advocacy for the rights of the people contradicted claims of servility. Montague noted that despite the accusations, Bacon was loved and honoured by many distinguished contemporaries, and was followed to his grave with devoted affection. He was a devout Anglican who believed in studying philosophy and the natural world through inductive methods. He argued that while humans can investigate arguments for God's existence, knowledge of God's attributes, such as his nature, actions, and purposes, comes solely from special revelation. Bacon saw knowledge as cumulative and expansive, surpassing mere preservation of the past. He famously wrote, and I quote, "Knowledge is the rich storehouse for the glory of the Creator and the relief of man's estate." In his essays, he posited that "a little philosophy inclineth man's mind to atheism, but depth in philosophy bringeth men's minds about to religion." Bacon's concepts of idols of the mind was an attempt to Christianize science while developing a new, reliable scientific method. For instance, he used the worship of Neptune as an example of the idolatribus fallacy, hinting at the religious undertones of his critique. He opposed the fragmentation within Christianity, fearing it would lead to widespread atheism. He articulated this concern by stating the following: "The causes of atheism are divisions in religion, if they be many. For any one main division addeth zeal to both sides, but many divisions introduce atheism. Another is scandal of priests. A third is custom of profane scoffing in holy matters. And lastly, learned times, specifically with peace and prosperity, for troubles and adversaries, do more bow men's minds to religion." In his personal life, he experienced romantic and marital challenges. At 36, he courted Elizabeth Hatton, a young widow, but she ended their relationship to marry his rival Sir Edward Coke. He expressed regret over the failed courtship years and years later. While at 45 years old, he did get married to Alice Barnum, the 13-year-old daughter of a prominent London alderman. He wrote sonnets professing his love for Alice during their courtship and on their wedding day, which was on May the 10th, 1606. When Bacon became Lord Chancellor, Alice was given precedence over the court ladies by special warrant of the king. William Raleigh, Bacon's personal secretary and chaplain, noted their marriage was characterized by much conjugal love and respect. Mentioning a robe of honor that Bacon had gifted to her, which she wore until her death over 20 years after his. However, reports of marital friction surfaced, possibly due to Alice's dissatisfaction with their financial situation. As their debts grew, Alice sought financial favors from friends, leading to further strain. Bacon eventually disinherited Alice upon discovering her affair with Sir John Underhill, rewriting his will to exclude her entirely. Now, regarding Bacon's sexuality, some authors believe he primarily was attracted to men despite his marriage. Alan Stewart and John Aubrey, among others, have suggested that Bacon's relationships with men were significant. Aubrey recorded in his Brief Lives that Bacon was a PDF file, and had male favorites who accepted bribes. Now, the term pederast in Renaissance usage generally referred to homosexual men rather than specifically those involved with minors. Now, this is just speculation. We don't really know for sure, of course, but it does need to be mentioned. Now, Sir Symonds D'Ewes, implied that Bacon faced accusations of buggery, a charge also levelled at his brother Anthony. In his diary entry for May the 3rd, 1621, the day of Bacon's censure by Parliament, D'Ewes mentioned Bacon's affection for his Welsh serving-men, particularly a youth named Godric, whom he called Bacon's catamite and bedfellow. However, this view is contested, with some scholars arguing that the evidence is inconsistent and open to one's own interpretation. Publicly, Bacon distanced himself from homosexuality, describing his utopian island in his work New Atlantis as the chastest nation under heaven, and stating, as for masculine love, they have no touch of it. On April 9th, 1626, Bacon died of pneumonia at Arundel Mansion in Highgate, just outside of London. His death, shrouded in a tale that highlighted his dedication to scientific inquiry, was vividly recounted by John Aubrey in his work Brief Lives. According to Aubrey, Bacon, accompanied by the king's physician, was inspired to use snow to preserve meat during a journey through the winter. They immediately decided to experiment, stopping at a poor woman's house at the bottom of Highgate Hill to buy a fowl, which they then stuffed with snow. This exposure to the cold led Bacon to contracting a fatal case of pneumonia. Aubrey's account suggests a direct link between his experiment and Bacon's subsequent illness and death, quoting thusly, "The snow so chilled him that he immediately fell so extremely ill that he could not return to his lodging, but went to the Earl of Arundel's house at Highgate, where they put him into a damp bed that had not been lain in, which gave him such a cold that in 2 or 3 days, as I remember that Mr. Hobbs told me, he died of suffocation." Although Aubrey has been criticized for his credulity, his close relationship with Thomas Hobbes, the aforementioned Mr. Hobbes, and Bacon's friend and fellow philosopher, lends some credence to his account. On his deathbed, Bacon dictated his final letter to his absent host and friend, Lord Arundel, reflecting on the experiment and his sudden illness, and it goes like this. "My very good lord, I was likely to have had the fortune of Caius Plinius the Elder, who lost his life by trying an experiment about the burning of Mount Vesuvius, for I was also desirous to try an experiment or two touching the conservation and induration of bodies. As for the experiment itself, it succeeded excellently well, but in the journey between London and Highgate, I was taken with such a fit of casting, as I know not whether it were the stone or some surfeit of cold, or indeed a touch of them all three. When I came to your lordship's house, I was not able to go back, and therefore was forced to take up my lodging here, where your housekeeper is very careful and diligent about me, which I assure myself your lordship will not only pardon towards him, but think the better of him for it. For indeed your lordship's house was happy to me, and I kiss your noble hands for the welcome which I am sure you give me to it. I know how unfit it is for me to write with any other hand than mine own, but by my troth my fingers are so disjointed with sickness that I cannot steadily hold a pen. Another account of Bacon's death is provided by William Raleigh, his personal secretary and chaplain. Raleigh described Bacon's death as occurring on the 9th day of April in the year 1626, in the early morning of the day, then celebrated for our Saviour's resurrection, in the 66th year of his age, at the Earl of Arundel's house in Highgate near London, to which place he casually repaired about a week before, God so ordaining that he should die there of a gentle fever, accidentally accompanied with a great cold, whereby the defluxion of rheum fell so plentiful upon his breast that he died by suffocation. Bacon was buried in St. Michael's Church in St. Albans. His death prompted a collection of eulogies from over 30 notable contemporaries, which were later published in Latin. Despite leaving personal assets of about £7,000 and lands that realized £6,000 upon their sale, his debts at the time of his death amounted to over £23,000, equivalent to more than £4 million today, if adjusted properly for inflation. Now his seminal work, Novum Organum, played a pivotal role in shaping scholarly thought in the 1630s and 50s. It notably influenced Sir Thomas Browne, who adhered to Baconian principles in his Encyclopaedia Pseudodoxia Epidemica in 1646–72. This book established the scientific method based on observation and induction. Bacon argued that all learning and knowledge derive from inductive reasoning. He believed that through experimental encounters one could attain the necessary knowledge to fully understand a concept. Inductive reasoning involves observing the specific details of nature and then organizing these observations into a coherent structure that can be presented to the understanding. Bacon emphasized that experimentation is crucial for discovering nature's truths. By piecing together the results of various experiments, one can form conclusions and understand nature better. It seems very obvious in 2024, but at the time this was a little bit of a new idea. According to Bacon, nature is a complex system that requires diligent observation to uncover its secrets. He posited that by examining specific examples from nature and expanding them into general claims, one could get substantial knowledge from them. This specific process of understanding particulars leads us to a broader comprehension and knowledge of nature, allowing for the new information to be organized and obtained. His belief in the power of inductive methods to provide definitive answers about the universe's laws and nature was supremely confident. He concluded that all learning and knowledge must therefore be drawn from inductive reasoning. During the Restoration, Bacon was often invoked as an inspiration for the Royal Society, founded under Charles II in 1660. His non-metaphysical approach to science became more influential in the 18th century during the French Enlightenment, surpassing the dualism of his French contemporary René Descartes. In 1733, Voltaire introduced Bacon to a French audience, as the, as he quoted, father of the scientific method, a view that, in fairness, became widespread by the 1750s. In the 19th century, Bacon's emphasis on induction was revived and developed by thinkers like William Whewell. Consequently, he is also often regarded as the father of experimental philosophy. Bacon also wrote comprehensive treatises on medicine, the history of life and death, which included natural and experimental observations aimed at prolonging life. The historian William Hepworth Dixon highlighted Bacon's profound impact on modern life, stating, "Bacon's influence in the modern world is so great that every man who rides in a train, sends a telegram, follows a steam plow, sits in an easy chair, crosses the Channel or the Atlantic, eats a good dinner, enjoys a beautiful garden, or undergoes a painless surgical operation, owes him something." Francis Bacon played a pivotal role in the establishment of the British colonies in North America, particularly in Virginia, the Carolinas, and Newfoundland. His government report on the Virginia colony, submitted in 1609, demonstrated his commitment to colonization efforts. In 1610, he and his associates secured a charter from the king to form the treasurer and the company of adventurers and planters of the city of London and Bristol for the colony or plantation in Newfoundland, leading to the dispatch of John Guy to establish a colony there. Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, also lauded Francis Bacon, along with Locke and Newton, as one of the greatest men, crediting them with laying the foundations for advancements in physical and moral sciences. Although few of Bacon's proposals for law reform were implemented during his lifetime, his legal legacy was indeed significant. The magazine New Scientist in 1961 recognized his influence on the Napoleonic Code and the legal reforms introduced by 19th century Prime Minister Sir Robert Peel. Harvey Wheeler, in Francis Bacon's Verulamium, the common law template of the modern English science and culture, credited Bacon with creating key features of the modern common law system. These include using cases as evidence of the unwritten law, determining the relevance of precedents through exclusionary principles, and treating opposing legal beliefs as adversarial hypotheses. Sir Matthew Hale, a 17th century jurist, acknowledged Bacon as the inventor of the process for discovering unwritten laws from their applications, combining empiricism and inductivism in a manner that profoundly influenced modern English society. Bacon is commemorated with a statue in Gray's Inn, South Square, London, that still stands, where he received his legal training and was elected treasurer of the inn all the way back in 1608. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure once again. I'd like to thank my top-tier patrons, Britt, Charles, Jeffrey, Stark Factory, and JC. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you would like to do so, you know where the link is in the description. But I will thank you once again for joining me, and wish you all the best. Until we meet again, hopefully tomorrow. Good night, everyone.